My daughter-in-law told my son that I didn't belong at the Christmas table. She didn't say it to my face. She never did anything to my face. That's the kind of woman she was. All warmth when you were looking. All calculation when you weren't. I found out the way I find out most things. Too late, and by accident. My name is Ernest. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 31 of those years working the line at a meat processing plant outside of Beaumont, Texas. I'm not ashamed of that. I got up every morning at 4:15, drove 20 minutes in the dark, put on my gear, and I worked. Some days it was so cold in that building. Your fingers went numb by 6 a.m. Some days you didn't want to think too hard about what you were doing. But the checks cleared, the lights stayed on, and my son Miles, never missed a meal, never wore shoes with holes, never had to worry about whether Christmas was coming. I retired 3 years ago with a bad knee and a modest pension. I live in the same house I bought in 1998, a two-bedroom on Oleander Street with a carport and a pecan tree in the back that drops more nuts than I know what to do with every fall. I give them to the neighbors. I make pies. I watch the game on Sundays. It's a quiet life and I earned it. Myers married Stephanie 4 years ago. The wedding was in Houston at a venue that cost more than my first car. Her family is from River Oaks money. The kind of money that doesn't talk about money because it doesn't have to. Her father, Gerald, owns a chain of dental equipment supply companies. Her mother, Patricia. And I want to be fair here, because she was always polite to me. Patricia spent her days organizing charity galas and sitting on the boards of things. They were nice enough people, distant in the way that some people are when they've never had to be close to anyone they didn't choose. Stephanie herself was sharp, driven. She worked in commercial real estate and was good at it. I respected that about her, but from the beginning, there was something in the way she looked at me. Not unkind exactly, but measuring. Like she was calculating what I subtracted from the picture. Miles never saw it. Or maybe he did, and didn't want to. He's always been like that, my boy. Gentle. He believes people are doing their best until he can't believe it anymore. The Christmas thing started the way a lot of things started in that marriage, with a group text. It was November, about 6 weeks before the holiday. Stephanie sent a message to Myers, her parents, her brother Kevin and his wife, and a few other family members about the Christmas plan. They were doing it at her parents' place in River Oaks, same as last year. Big dinner, catered, the whole thing. I wasn't on the text. Myers told me about it later, and I didn't read much into that at the time. I figured he'd just loop me in separately. He called me that same evening. "Dad, you're coming for Christmas, right?" "Of course," I said. "What do you need me to bring?" There was a pause. Just a half second, but I noticed it. Nothing. "Just yourself. I'll send you the time and address." I didn't ask about the pause. I should have. 3 weeks later, Miles called again. It was a Tuesday night, and I could tell from his voice that he'd been sitting on something. "Hey, Dad, listen. I need to tell you something." "Okay." Stephanie mentioned she said her parents are thinking about keeping Christmas a little more intimate this year. Just close family. I let that sit for a moment. "Close family," I said. "Yeah. And I'm not close family. That's not. Dad, I don't agree with this. I want you there." But she doesn't. He didn't answer right away, and that told me everything. I'm not a man who cries easily. I grew up with a father who thought emotion was something you expressed through action. You showed up, you worked, you provided, and that was love. I've tried to be a little different with Miles. A little more open. But standing in my kitchen that Tuesday night, holding the phone and looking out at the pecan tree going bare in the December cold, I felt something tighten in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "What did she say exactly?" I asked. Miles was quiet for a moment. She said her parents feel more comfortable with smaller gatherings, that adding more people makes things complicated. "More people," I said. "I'm one person." "I know, Dad. Did she say anything else?" Another pause. "Longer this time, Miles." She said. He stopped, started again. "She said you probably feel out of place, that it's a formal dinner and her family has certain expectations about how things are done. She said it might be awkward for everyone." Out of place. Awkward for everyone. 31 years on the line. A son who graduated college debt-free. A house paid off in full. And I would feel out of place at a catered Christmas dinner in River Oaks. I understand, I said. Dad, I'm not upset at you. I understand. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing in particular, and then we hung up. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't make dinner. I just stood there. I want you to understand something about my relationship with Miles before I tell you what happened next. After his mother left, Miles was 9 years old. It was just the two of us. I didn't date much. I didn't have the energy, and honestly, I didn't have the interest. I coached his little league team for 3 years, even though I knew nothing about baseball and had to read a book about it from the library. I drove him to school every morning until he was old enough to drive himself, and even then I woke up at the same time out of habit. When he got into UT Austin, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the plant and cried for 10 minutes before I went in for my shift. He is the best thing I have ever done, the best thing I will ever do. So when I say I understood, I don't mean I wasn't hurt. I mean I understood that Myers was caught between two things he loved, and I wasn't going to make that harder for him. I had raised him to be kind, and he was trying to be kind to everyone. I knew that. But I also knew that what Stephanie had said wasn't about a formal dinner or seating arrangements or anyone feeling comfortable. It was about what I represented. A man who smelled like cold storage and floor cleaner. A man who owned one suit and had to check YouTube to remember how to tie the Windsor knot. A man who didn't know which fork was for salad and wouldn't have cared if he did. I called my sister Beverly that night. Beverly is 2 years older than me and has never once in her life softened a truth to protect somebody's feelings. "Ernest," she said when I finished telling her, "what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do." Maybe she was right. The week before Christmas, Miles came to visit. He drove down from Houston on a Saturday morning. Just him, without Stephanie. He said she was working. There was a commercial deal closing before the end of the year. Maybe that was true. We sat on the back porch with coffee and watched the pecan tree. Myers had brought some of those fancy pastries from a bakery near their place. The kind with French names that taste good but never quite fill you up. He set them on the little table between our chairs and neither of us touched them. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About Christmas." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "I don't want to do it without you, Dad. I've been trying to figure out how to say that to Stephanie. And I haven't said it yet." He looked at me. "That's not good." "No," I said. He knocked and said, "It's not." He nodded slowly. He had his mother's eyes, dark and quiet, and right then they looked troubled in a way that made him look young again, made him look 9 years old. "She's not a bad person," he said. "I need you to know I don't think she's a bad person." "I don't think she is either," I said. And I meant it. I've known bad people. Stephanie wasn't bad. She was just someone who had grown up in a world where people like me were invisible, and she'd never thought too hard about that. The world had let her not think about it. "But this is wrong," Miles said. "What she did is wrong." "Yes, I'm going to fix it." I looked at him for a long moment. My son, 31 years old, sitting in the same chair he'd sat in as a kid doing homework on the back porch because he said he thought better outside. "You don't need to fix it for me," I said. "I'm fine. I've had harder Christmases." "That's not the point." "I know it's not." He left that afternoon with his French pastries, most of them uneaten. I stood in the carport and watched his car until it turned the corner. Then I went inside and started making a pecan pie, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Christmas Eve was 4 days away. I got the call from Miles on the morning of December 23rd. "Dad, I need you to listen to me." "I'm listening." "I told Stephanie last night that you were coming to Christmas dinner, that it wasn't a question, that if my father wasn't welcome in her parents' home, then we wouldn't be having Christmas at her parents' home." I sat down at the kitchen table. "What did she say?" "A lot of things, some of them not great." He paused. "But this morning she called her mother and sorted it out. You're on the guest list, Dad. You're coming." I didn't know what to say. I'm not sure I said anything for a moment. "Miles, don't thank me." This is not something you thank someone for. This is just what's right. That hit me somewhere deep, because I had said those exact words to him when he was 12 years old and a kid at school had been left out of a birthday party. This is just what's right. I hadn't remembered saying it. He had. Christmas Day, I ironed my good shirt. A dark green button-down I'd bought 2 years ago for a cousin's retirement party. And I polished my boots. Not dress shoes. I don't own dress shoes. Beverly always told me I should buy a pair. And I always said I would and I never did. But my boots are good leather and I keep them clean, and I figured that counted for something. The drive to River Oaks took about 40 minutes. I brought two things: a bottle of bourbon from a distillery in Gonzales that my buddy at work had turned me on to years ago. Good stuff, real stuff, and the pecan pie I'd made the day before. The house was something. I won't pretend otherwise. 3 stories, a circular driveway, a live oak out front strung with white lights. There were already 4 or 5 cars I didn't recognize parked along the street. I sat in my truck for a minute before I went in. Not because I was nervous, just because I wanted a moment to myself before the evening started. Miles met me at the door. He shook my hand and then pulled me into a hug, the way he's done since he was old enough to reach my shoulders. "You look good, Dad." "You look tired," I said. He laughed. "I am." The inside of the house was warm and loud and smelled like catered food, that particular smell of large quantities of things that have been prepared somewhere else and kept warm in hotel pans. There were maybe 20 people spread across the main floor, and I recognized approximately none of them except Stephanie and her parents. Gerald came over and shook my hand. Firm grip, good eye contact. Whatever had happened between Miles and Stephanie, Gerald at least had the grace to act like none of it had. We talked for a few minutes about nothing. Texas weather, the Texan season, whether the bourbon I'd brought was any good. He seemed genuinely curious about the bourbon. Stephanie said hello to me from across the room and smiled. It was a careful smile. I returned it. We didn't have a conversation, not right then. I found a chair near the fireplace and spent some time watching. That's something I learned to do on the plant floor. Watch and listen before you talk. You learn a lot that way. I watched Stephanie move through the room, efficient and gracious, making sure glasses were filled and introductions were made. She was good at it. I watched Miles watch me from across the room with an expression that was half relief, half something I couldn't quite name. Dinner was at 7. Long table, catered plates, the good china out. I counted 4 forks at my place setting and made a decision to use whichever one felt right and not worry about it. Nobody was going to correct me, and if they did, it wouldn't be the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I was seated between a woman named Dottie, who turned out to be Patricia's college roommate, and who talked to me for 20 minutes about pecan farming in a way that was genuinely interesting, and a teenage boy named something I immediately forgot, who spent dinner looking at his phone under the table. Normal people. Regular Christmas dinner things. The bourbon went over well. Gerald poured it for the table after dinner and said something complimentary about it that I think he meant. Patricia tried a small glass and made a face that she tried to hide, and I liked her better for that. Stephanie came and sat next to me during dessert. I hadn't expected that. She was quiet for a moment, smoothing her napkin across her lap. Then she said, "I'm glad you came." I looked at her. "Are you?" She met my eyes. To her credit, she didn't look away. "I owe you an apology," she said. "What I said to Miles about you feeling out of place, that was unkind, and it was wrong. I thought about a lot of things I could have said. I thought about the 31 years of 4:15 mornings and cold buildings and a boy who never missed a meal. I thought about a Tuesday night in November standing in my kitchen looking at a bare pecan tree. I thought about Beverly saying, 'Yes, you do,' on the phone. What I said was, 'Thank you for saying that.'" She nodded. "He loves you very much." I think I didn't understand what that meant until this week. "I know he does," I said. "I've known that since he was 9 years old." We didn't say much more than that. But something settled between us, the way things sometimes do when two people stop pretending. I don't know what Stephanie said to her parents after Miles put his foot down. I don't know exactly what was said in that conversation or what it cost her. I imagine it wasn't easy. I give her credit for making it. Miles drove me home that night. I told him to leave his car and I'd drive him back in the morning. It was late, and I didn't like the idea of him making that drive on Christmas night. He didn't argue. We sat on the back porch with the bourbon I'd brought home the bottle, and we looked out at the dark yard and the pecan tree and the few stars you can see through the light pollution in Beaumont. It was cold enough to see our breath, and we sat close to the old space heater I drag out this time of year. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I'm all right," I said. "I mean it. How are you actually doing?" I thought about it. "I'm proud of you," I said. He turned to look at me. "You did something hard this week," I said. "And you did it right. That matters more to me than anything that happened at that dinner table." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I learned it from you, you know. The thing you always said about doing right not because it's easy, but because you can't not. I didn't remember saying that either, but it sounded like something I believed." We stayed out there until past midnight, talking about nothing important, his work, my knee, whether the pecan tree was going to need trimming in the spring. The kind of conversation that sounds like nothing and means everything. The kind you can only have with someone you've known long enough that the silence between the words is comfortable. Before he went to bed, Miles stopped in the doorway and looked back at me. "Merry Christmas, Dad." "Merry Christmas, son." I sat out there a while longer after he went in. Just me and the dark and the cold and the tree. I thought about what it means to belong somewhere. Not the kind of belonging that comes from having the right last name or the right address or knowing which fork to use. The kind that comes from someone choosing you, from someone deciding that the table isn't the table without you at it. That kind of belonging you can't buy and you can't fake. You either built it over 30 years of showing up or you didn't. I had. I keep coming back to that pecan tree. There's something about watching a tree go bare in winter that used to bother me when I was younger. All that stripping away, all that exposure. But I've lived in this house long enough now to know what I know. The tree doesn't die. It's just waiting. Everything it needs to survive the cold is already inside it, built up over years of root and ring and slow, quiet growth. Miles is like that tree. And I think what happened this Christmas showed me how deep those roots actually go. Here's what I've come to understand about cause and effect the older I get. Nothing that happened that December came out of nowhere. Stephanie didn't exclude me because she woke up one morning and decided to be cruel. She excluded me because she had spent her whole life in rooms where people like me simply weren't present, and absence is its own kind of teaching. You learn, without anyone telling you directly, that certain people belong at certain tables. That lesson gets so deep inside you, you stop noticing it's there. And Miles didn't stand up for me because I asked him to. I never asked him to. He stood up for me because 31 years of watching his father show up, cold mornings, hard work, no shortcuts, no excuses, had built something in him that couldn't be talked out of him by anyone, not even someone he loved. That's the thing about what you do when nobody's grading you. It doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. It goes into the people watching. I think about the choices Miles made that week, telling Stephanie plainly and without anger that I was coming, holding that line even when it cost him something, and then sitting on my back porch at midnight, drinking bourbon like none of it had been hard. That took something that I don't think you can teach in a classroom or read in a book. It took the kind of clear-eyed knowing that comes from understanding what actually matters versus what just looks like it matters. Stephanie's family had a beautiful house and good china, and the right last names. Miles knew without needing to say it out loud that none of that was worth trading his father for. That's not intelligence the way a test measures it. It's something quieter and harder to come by. The ability to see through what's shiny to what's real. And Stephanie, I've thought about her a lot since that night. She apologized to me, and she meant it, and that mattered. It would have been easier for her not to. It would have been easier to stay behind whatever wall she'd built and let the evening pass and never acknowledge that anything had been wrong. The fact that she crossed that distance anyway, that she sat down next to me and said the hard thing, tells me something about who she is underneath the polish. There's someone in there who knows right from wrong and is willing to pay the price of admitting it. I didn't build my life chasing anyone's approval. I built it by getting up when I didn't want to, Staying when leaving would have been easier, and making sure my son knew, not through speeches, but through 30 years of ordinary mornings, that he was worth every bit of it. That's all I ever had to give. Turns out it was enough. The tree's already budding again. I checked this morning.